Did you know that over 70% of American travelers now say they're treated differently abroad, and not in a good way? That number says more than you'd think. They're noticing colder service, awkward questions, and in some cases, outright hostility. From Reddit to TikTok, tourist shaming has become a global pastime, and US travelers are often the stars. Entire threads are dedicated to moments where American visitors come across as loud, oblivious, or entitled.
For decades, the American passport carried an almost magical weight. With its deep blue cover and the power of the United States behind it, it was often described as a global golden ticket, opening doors in every corner of the world. But that reputation has crumbled. Today, surveys reveal that more than 70% of Americans traveling abroad believe they face discrimination, hostility, or at best a cold reception. In other words, the American traveler, once welcomed almost everywhere, now finds the world turning its back. This dramatic shift isn't confined to airports and tourist hotspots. It's playing out online, across social media, where viral videos and memes mock American tourists relentlessly. Clips showing cultural blunders, entitled behavior, or disrespectful attitudes are shared millions of times, turning once isolated incidents into global spectacles. What might seem like a small mistake, a raised voice in a market, frustration at a language barrier, or even a misplaced joke, becomes evidence of a wider narrative that Americans abroad lack cultural awareness, humility, or respect. And the result is clear. The world's perception of the American tourist is deteriorating fast. The data is sobering. A recent global survey revealed that 7 in 10 travelers now view the U.S. passport as carrying a more negative weight than it once did. Americans abroad are seen less as casual tourists and more as symbols of a nation losing credibility. That symbolism has consequences. Many countries have begun reinstating visa requirements or tightening entry procedures for U.S. citizens, reversing decades of open-door policies. Part of this problem stems from what critics call an ingrained cultural assumption that American norms should be universal. Complaints over shopkeepers not speaking English, demands for credit card acceptance everywhere, or requests to alter traditional foods to suit American tastes, all may appear minor in isolation, but online they are amplified into powerful images of entitlement. And when small incidents pile up, they create lasting stereotypes. The anger has spilled into the streets. In Mexico City, protesters gathered outside the U.S. Embassy chanting slogans like, "Gringo, stop taking from us." In Spain, demonstrations against over-tourism have grown so heated that the American embassy issued an advisory to its citizens. In Kyoto, Japan, authorities banned tourists from entering certain alleyways after reports of harassment toward geisha. And in Vietnam, an American visitor drew outrage for wearing a t-shirt displaying a gun and the words, "Freedom the American Way," while visiting a war museum. These examples illustrate a troubling reality. Americans are not only disliked online, but their behavior is increasingly sparking real-world backlash. The economic fallout is enormous. In March alone, international arrivals to the United States dropped by nearly 18%. Canada accounted for the sharpest decline, with cross-border visits collapsing by 28%. Tourism, long described as America's money-printing machine, is hemorrhaging billions. Once bustling airports have grown eerily quiet. San Francisco, one of the nation's most visited cities, saw hotel vacancy rates reach an astonishing 40% last summer. Las Vegas, the city that prides itself on never sleeping, reported hotel occupancy at just 76% during what should have been its busiest season, a 7-point drop from the previous year. But the story doesn't end with empty airports and hotels. It reaches into every corner of the American economy. Restaurants that once thrived on tourist crowds now struggle with rows of empty tables. In Las Vegas, locals describe once busy dining rooms falling silent, with servers left staring at polished tables that no one sits at. For those working in the service industry, the pain is immediate. In the U.S., tipped wages make up the majority of earnings for bartenders, waitstaff, and hotel staff. When customers disappear, so do the tips, and with them, the ability to pay rent or buy groceries. The crisis is compounded by inflation. Families already squeezed by rising prices for fuel, food, and housing are cutting back on travel and leisure. What was once a joyful dinner out has become a careful calculation. Dine at a restaurant or save the money for gas to get to work. Retail tells the same story. In Florida, once vibrant shopping districts are now lined with discount signs, desperate to attract customers who never come. In Honolulu, souvenir sellers who once lived comfortably from international tourism now dip into retirement savings just to survive. Hotels, entirely dependent on the physical presence of guests, are among the hardest hit. In New Orleans, a family-run hotel that survived more than half a century of business finally closed its doors. The owner wept as she explained that it was cheaper to shut down than to keep the lights on in empty rooms. This is not an isolated case, it's a nationwide trend. Orlando, long a global magnet for families thanks to Disney and Universal, now finds itself losing visitors to Tokyo and Paris, where tourists report better value for their money and more reliable service. Underlying all this is what analysts call the trust gap. Tourists increasingly feel that American destinations charge more while offering less. Hidden fees, so-called drip pricing, have become notorious. Whether it's a hotel bill padded with unexpected charges or a bottle of water priced at 5 times its value, travelers leave feeling cheated. This perception of being nickel and dimed has transformed into a strategic disadvantage for the U.S. As tourists seek authenticity and fair value elsewhere, trust in American hospitality fades. And once lost, trust is almost impossible to rebuild. The ripple effect is massive. In Key West, tourism revenue has dropped more than 20%. In Gatlinburg, more than half of souvenir shops have closed early. Across Georgia, once considered the jewel of the American South, hotels that were once fully booked now report vacancy rates approaching 40%. The Georgia World Congress Center, a hub for international conferences, lost more than $1 billion in a single quarter as cancellations skyrocketed. One viral video accelerated the crisis. In June 2025, 2 German musicians were detained for hours at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport before being deported without explanation. The video went viral, racking up nearly 20 million views in days. A month later, Germany issued a travel advisory. International conventions canceled contracts worth hundreds of millions. Almost overnight, Atlanta's airport became a symbol of American hostility toward foreign visitors. Instead of offering reassurance, Georgia's political leaders doubled down, framing deportations and new restrictions as matters of sovereignty. Laws were passed restricting foreign land purchases, enforcing fingerprinting of visitors, and tightening short-term rental rules. While presented as protective measures, to the outside world they carried a clear message. Foreigners were no longer welcome, and the damage didn't stop at state borders. Canada, America's largest tourism market, responded swiftly after Trump's re-election and his inflammatory comments about tariffs and even annexing Canada as a 51st state. Canadian families who once flocked to Florida or Georgia canceled vacations en masse, redirecting billions of dollars into domestic tourism instead. Surveys show more than 40% of Canadians now prefer to holiday within their own borders. Canada, meanwhile, is experiencing an unprecedented tourism boom, fueled by both domestic travelers and Europeans who have abandoned U.S. destinations. Europe has also moved on. Portugal, Mexico, and even smaller U.S. rivals like Nashville and Charleston have stepped in to seize international conferences and tourists that once defaulted to American cities. Orlando is now marketing itself as America's friendly center in a desperate attempt to repair the country's global reputation. But it may be too late. Forecasts that once predicted 9% growth in international arrivals to the U.S. for 2025 have been revised downward to a shocking negative 8%. The U.S. Travel Association now warns losses could hit $72 billion in a single year. The collapse of tourism is more than an economic story, it's a social one. Tourism jobs employ millions of Americans, from restaurant servers to hotel staff to entertainment workers. In just one summer, nearly 100,000 tourism-related jobs vanished in Georgia alone. Across the nation, restaurants have lost tens of thousands of employees, hotels tens of thousands more, with entertainment and cultural industries following closely. Municipal budgets, heavily dependent on tourism-related taxes, are falling into deficit. Cuts to public services, from schools to policing to road maintenance, are becoming inevitable. At the heart of the crisis lies a deeper truth. Tourism depends on goodwill. Hospitality is a silent pact between visitor and host, built on respect and trust. When that trust erodes, when travelers feel overcharged, disrespected, or unsafe, they don't just stop coming. They go elsewhere, often never to return. The United States is discovering that harsh reality. History is filled with examples. After World War I, America turned inward, refusing to join global institutions like the League of Nations. Now, a century later, another period of self-isolation seems to be unfolding. This time, not through military or political choices, but through something as simple as how visitors are treated at the border, in hotels, and on the streets. The question is no longer whether the U.S. can lure back its tourists with discounts or flashy marketing. The real question is whether the damage to trust and reputation is permanent. Can the American dream still be sold abroad when the world increasingly feels it has better, friendlier, and cheaper options elsewhere? For decades, the U.S. marketed itself as a global Disneyland, bright, exciting, endlessly appealing. But today, that Disneyland image is cracking. It looks less like a place of wonder and more like an overpriced amusement park with fewer rides, higher ticket prices, and declining service. Tourists around the world are asking the same thing. Why should we go to America when the experience no longer matches the cost? The answer to that question may decide the future of an industry once worth hundreds of billions. And it may also decide whether America can maintain the global influence it once took for granted. Because when the world turns away, not just from your goods or your politics, but from your very culture, the consequences are felt for generations.